the 19th of March 2026, and welcome everyone. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to see this meeting and hear the audio. Members and those in attendance, can I ask you to introduce yourselves, please, starting from my left-hand side, and please give your name, role, and organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Robinson. I'm the Exec Director, Joint Director for Public Health at the Shropshire Council and Shropshire ICB as well.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Cawley, Chief Officer of Health Watch Shropshire. Hi, I'm Jackie Jeffrey, Chief Officer at Citizens Advice Shropshire, and I'm the Voluntary and Community Sector Rep.
Good morning, I'm Jess Edwards, Business Intelligence Manager at Shropshire Council.
Thank you.
Morning, I'm Gordon Coshane, Public Health Consultant at Shropshire Council.
Thank you, Gordon.
Morning, I'm the outgoing Chief Officer for Partners in Care. It's my last meeting today.
Welcome,
Morning,
David.
I'm Glyce Mount. I'm the incoming Chief Officer for Partners in Care.
Welcome.
Morning all, Sean Morris, Public Health, Shropshire Council, Drug and Alcohol Commissioner.
Good morning, Wendy Borman, Domestic Abuse Strategic Lead for Shropshire Council.
Thank you.
Morning everybody, Natalie McFall, Interim Statutory DAS for Shropshire Council.
Thank you, Natalie.
Morning, Ruth Houghton, Councillor for Bishop's Castle and the Portfolio Holder for Social Care.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good morning everyone, I'm David Shaw, I'm Director of Children's Services at Shropshire Council.
Hi, Dave.
Good morning everybody, Claire Parker, Director of Strategy and Development at NHS Shropshire Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you, Claire.
Hit the right button. Good morning, Nigel Lee. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at South Acute Hospital.
Michelle Dulson, Committee Officer for Shropshire Council.
Louisa Jones, Business Support Lead for Partnerships, Shropshire Council.
Vanessa Watley, I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for NHS Shropshire Telford and Wrekin, the ICB, but also interim across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent as well.
Welcome, Vanessa, and you're standing in today for our other co-chair, who is Simon Whitehouse. So welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm Bernie Bentic. I'm portfolio holder for Health and Public Protection and co-chair of this Health and Wellbeing Board. Yeah. See who they are. I can't see. So online is Laura Fisher. Hello, Laura.
Good morning. Laura Fisher, Head of Housing Resettlement Independent Living at Shropshire Council.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome. Lisa Gardner.
Morning, everybody. Lisa Gardner. I'm Development Officer in the Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnerships Business Unit.
Thank you. Ben Hollands.
Good morning, Ben Hollands. I am the Senior Public Health Manager at Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust.
Thank you and welcome, Ben. Claire Davis.
Good morning, Claire Davis, new incoming Chief Exec at Age UK, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you and welcome, Claire. Damilola.
Good morning, I'm Damilola Agbato, Public Health Principal for Sexual and Reproductive Health at Shropshire Council.
Thank you and welcome, Damilola. That's everybody. Apologies have been received from Tanya Miles, Interim Chief Executive, Shropshire Council, Claire Horsfield, Director of Operations and Chief AHP, Shropshire Community Health NHS Trust, Sam Burton, Acting Head of Service Delivery, Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service, and Ed Hancox, Superintendent of West Mercia Police. I remind members to disclose any pecuniary interests not already recorded in the Register of Interests and to leave the meeting prior to those items being discussed. Does anybody need to declare? No, thank you. So we move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes of the last meeting? No, thank you. So I move that the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board held on the 22nd of January 2026 be signed as a correct order, a correct record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. And those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. No public questions have been received. And so we move on to the item 5, Shropshire Community Safety Partnership Annual Report. Lisa Gardner is going to talk to this, and the recommendation is for us to note the contents of the report. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, so I will take the report as read by everybody. It was sent round with the papers. So the Community Safety Annual Report for 24-25 looks at the progress that has been made against the priorities for the Community Safety Partnership during that period. It is a partnership report, and the Community Safety Partnership is made up of key agencies across Shropshire who come together to tackle crime and disorder and reduce reoffending in Shropshire. The data contained within the report is that which we are able to share. So there is obviously other data that is available to members of the Community Safety Partnership that we are unable to share in this public forum. So whilst I will do my very best to answer any questions that people may have, it may be that we're getting into the realms of sensitivity. So I may have to say that I'm unable to answer those questions at this time. I have to say that 2024-25 was a really significant year of change for the partnership. We saw, you'll see, sorry, within the report that we previously had three boards that were under the Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership, all reporting into that one board, and what we did during this period was separate them into 3 separate boards. So we had the Community Safety Partnership, the Safeguarding Adult Board, and the Children's Safeguarding Partnership. So we separated them out, and this allowed us to really start to clearly focus on the priorities for those 3 areas. And the priorities for the 2024-25 had been set in February of 2023, and you will see what those were within the report. And even during, that really significant period of change that we went through, we were able to continue to do some really, really good work and undertake, a considerable amount of work to really focus on what those priority objectives were. Some of the ones that I'd really like to highlight to you were the serious violence duty projects that we ran. So there was the West Mercia Women's Aid project that ran across the whole of West Mercia. That was aimed at young people in schools. And we also had a local project that was run by Bright Star that worked with young people who are on the fringes of serious violence, and that was a real success as well. We had a diagnostic review undertaken, looking at all of our statutory case reviews, not just domestic homicide reviews. But what that did do was highlight some really good practice within our domestic homicide review process, and also highlighted the need for continued creativity in getting learning to our frontline practitioners. So it identified that we'd come up with, some really creative ways, but we needed to make sure that we continued to come up with new and inventive ways to get our messages to frontline practitioners. So it highlighted that good practice, but also, asked us to continue to come up with new and inventive ways. In February of 2025, we held a workshop to plan future priorities and also look at ways that we could really develop the CSP and take that to the next level. And I'm hopeful that when we come and present the 25-26 report to you, you'll be able to see the work that we've done to really drive performance to move that forward. So yeah, we've really started that. The 2024 transition year was where we started to really move things forward with our community safety partnership, and hopefully, as you will see through the years, we've really, it was a real pivotal point in terms of driving change.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I'm not sure you actually do yourself justice with all of the things that were achieved in that year, because I noted that total crime was down by 9.3%, violence without injury down by 13%, violence with injury down by about 25%, and all of these are very excellent figures, and thank you for those. But there were others as well, and in particular, I saw that hate crime was down by over 5%, anti-social behaviour down by almost 10%, and reoffending was down over the 2 years, including 2024-25, which is obviously all credit to the team. So thank you very much. I'd like to open this up to questions, please. Any questions? Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. Obviously, this report comes here annually, and this is obviously the report relating to 24-25. I think the hope is that we'll have quite in short order, not in another year's time, that you'll get the 25-26 report. So I know the team are working really hard on that at the moment. Obviously, this is really important to come to this board because it gives the overview of all the community safety partnership work. But actually, today you've got the kind of the aspects that particularly the Health and Wellbeing Board are focusing as part of our priorities, which is domestic abuse and the drugs and alcohol, both with picking those up and do pick those up regularly on the regularly through. It's part of our governance, make sure that we're assured around the progress and the work that's been led through that partnership rather than SHIP, for example. But those specific items are on the agenda, and we link that through just to make that connection back.
You that aren't club that will divert young people who are at risk of antisocial and criminal behaviour into leisure activities, and 85% I think completed the course, which is quite remarkable. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So we just note the comments of the report. Thank you. If we move on to the next item, which is domestic abuse, so Wendy Bullman is going to take us through this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Louise is going to share the presentation for me, if that's okay. Thank you. Now, I'm hoping you've all had a chance to read it in advance. So as Lisa did, I'll just talk you through it while Louise is kindly getting it up there for me. I can't manage 3 things at once. So what we touched upon in our first slide, which I will start talking about whilst Louise is doing that, is how we've reviewed the domestic abuse stuff against those health and wellbeing board priorities that were kind of set for us in the 24-25 period. And the presentation is going to look at how we outline the progress that we've achieved towards those in relation to domestic abuse. The objective centred on strengthening our, so you can go to the first slide, please, Louisa, that'd be great. Thank you. Strengthening our strategic planning, improving our partnership governance structures, embedding our lived experience voice into the work that we do across domestic abuse to ensure that our response aligns with our statutory duties under the Domestic Abuse Act. We also began the completion of the refreshed domestic abuse needs assessment, as is part of the statutory duty of a local authority every 3 years to refresh fully the needs assessment and recomplete one. So we had to do that in 2024. That provided us with the foundational evidence regarding the prevalence of domestic abuse, service pressures, gaps in provision, and the experiences of the rural and isolated communities. That is with a bit of a thing that caveat really about the prevalence, because the data, which we'll talk about as we go through this report, wasn't great at that point, but it gave us a starting position, which is always a good thing to have. And that assessment, when we looked at it compared to our previous assessment, we identified the same sort of gaps, which then moved us on to the development of a multi-agency domestic abuse partnership strategy. We had engagement including leadership representatives from across the sector, so from across all partners, enabling that collaborative approach to shaping the priorities and decision making. And the DALB, the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board, which is I'll refer to as the DALB as we go through, looked at its membership structure and looked at how we could have the right people there to ensure that things could be done quite quickly. Another area of achievement across the board was the data maturity, and we've been working with the data team under Jess to collect that data into a central point, and we're working on that really closely, and hopefully we'll be able to come and show some of that at a later date, the specific stuff that's relevant to you guys sat here. Significant progress was really made around the lived experience integration, moving from that basic feedback to actually having people meaningfully co-produce stuff with us. And collectively, the achievements represent that substantive advance towards that more accountable, coordinated and evidence-driven domestic abuse system in Shropshire. If we can move to the next slide, please. The development of the domestic abuse partnership strategy represents the major multi-agency undertaking, to be fair. We facilitated partnership workshops where we had people with lived experience. We had some rural expertise come along and present some information about rurality. We live in Shropshire, we understand rurality, but it gave us a national look at it from other areas as well, and looked at collectively what all of our statutory requirements were. As I say, they featured highly on specialist insight on rurality and looked at how geographic isolation, transport barriers, limited service visibility and community dynamics increase that risk and hinder help seeking in the rural areas. Because of those insights, it resulted in explicit commitments within the draft strategy to address this disparity in access, awareness and safety. The strategy's content evolved considerably through these kind of workshops and the drafts, and you may hopefully were aware that it was out for public consultation recently. It's closed and we're now at the process of the analyst team are working on that, and we'll present a report back to us on Monday within my team for us to then rewrite the draft into a final copy to go back to the DALB on the 13th of April. So that's that kind of position. Lived experience contributed specifically to that. They helped with priority areas, refining the language, and we did a lot of public consultation and market engagement to understand what the public wanted, so that it was fully kind of collaborative across all partners and the general public. We can move to the next slide, please. Since 24, as I said earlier, we've undertaken significant reforms. That key within the DALB, the key improvement being that we're getting better at having the right people at the DALB so that decisions can be made. And those workshops and that draft partnership strategy really highlighted that, because people were able to say yes, and we could move to the next steps. We need that so that we can get things done. The operational forum that sits with it underneath the DALB is also much more established now and running, and they're sat primed, ready and waiting to start working on the action planning that will actually help us, can't think of the right word, but make the strategy actually work, because the strategy is one thing, but it's the action planning and the so what underneath it. And our operational teams across the partnerships are sat at that forum ready and waiting for instructions from the DALB once we pass the 13th of April. The DALB is embedding that stronger culture of evidence-based decision-making and looking more at the dashboard of data. And as I say, we're trying to have a central spot within the DALB where all domestic abuse data from all partners comes in, and then it's from that it goes out to the separate boards, so that any questions ever raised about DA data, we know the answer to them, because at the moment there's data going in lots of different boards, but we don't see it at the DALB. So we're trying to get to that point, which I think will be amazing, and it will help the Health and Wellbeing Board because we'll fully understand what's going in across health and wellbeing as well as all the other areas. I hate wearing glasses, on and off, on and off. So the next slide is about that embedding of the survivor voice. We've really, really taken that forward. We have a lived experience officer within my team who has lots of lived experience. She creates a lived experience advisory group, which is just getting that voice from everybody from all corners. So there's staff members that contribute to that. There's general public, people that have never accessed the services, but have seen the social media sharing of what we're doing and are coming forward to offer their voice to help us ensure that full co-production. So we're starting with the blank page. All of this has started from that. Not us saying we want to do this, what do you think? It's proper, in my opinion, co-production. They've participated fully in workshops they've attended, come along and had their voice heard and listened to within the groups and stuff, which has been really good. Equitable commissioning practices, we want to get to the point. I want to get to the point that we are able to either pool budgets or collectively put aside when we're commissioning, thinking about where are the connections with domestic abuse, how can we do it better collectively. As a local authority, we only have funding directly for safe accommodation and not all the community-based stuff. We have some money for community-based stuff that comes from public health, but it's very minimal, and it's about looking at our partners. What else can we do in the community? So those commissioning practices are a work in progress. So we talked about the cultural shift toward accountability, embedding that survivor voice. Survivors are really clear. They want perpetrators to be held accountable and then potentially supported. And we've talked about that before. Survivors want to make that difference. They want perpetrators to actually be supported to make change so there aren't future victims. On to the next slide. I'm conscious of time. So the key insights from our needs assessment, it has been shared. I know it's been shared here before across the health system, is that what we're seeing is that there's the mental health impact. It's the most common disability that we're seeing in the data that we're seeing at the moment. It is the most common. Mental health is interesting. We sit on lots of different things. What the general public say is mental health isn't necessarily what the health system sees as mental health, because there are different layers, but it's what victims see as being mental health. So that could be as simple, and I mean that in the nicest possible ways, as what we would say is low-level depression, or somebody who's feeling a bit, and it can be as severe as somebody having, a psychotic episode. But mental health from the general public's point of view is their highest disability that comes up for victims. Health services, maternity, hospital innovative, substance use providers consistently encounter domestic abuse. So we know it sits within the health and social care ecosystem. And we've talked about that here before. And since I last came, health are much more represented at the DALB now. So there's much more input from the ICB. We could still improve on that with other partners from the voluntary community sector, but there are improvements since I was last here, which is really good. We've talked about MARIC in the report, so I can take any questions on that. MARIC being the multi-agency risk assessment conference for high-risk victims of domestic abuse. If we can go to the next slide. The next steps are around what we're doing is to finalise that strategy. As I've just said, we should have the report from analysts on Monday, and then we've got till the 13th of April. It is coming to Shropshire Council, Cabinet and Council in May for sign-off, but it's a partnership strategy. So, it will also go out to partners for them to follow their kind of structures. We want to implement that 3-year action plan. We want to then launch that performance dashboard. We're getting there with children's now with Jess's team. They've got some really good stuff from children's services. We need to get the early help stuff in there. We need to get the adult stuff. And then we need more from our partners around that health kind of workshop, health stuff. We plan to create workshops, and everything we're doing will link in through the Families First partnership that hopefully everybody on this board is aware of, that work that we're doing there. So it's all going to kind of streamline on that. We're making a point of being at all of the task and finish groups so that it's all linked. We're not trying to do stuff independently, separately and differently. It's got to be cohesive and joined up so that, people know what they're doing, because ultimately we're here for the victims and the community. There's a few risks that we're hoping to mitigate in regards to what we're doing, which is on the last slide there, Louisa. The data gaps impacting decision making. If we don't have the good data, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what we're going to commission the wrong thing. So it's about keep doing that, and we're getting better at that. Unequal rural access, so we're looking at how we can develop digital remote outreach for that, but of course that's community-based stuff, and that's where we need that collaborative, joined-up commissioning kind of processes. We're working on training and support into the community, and we're working with our hubs leads about building not a policy as such, but a statement about how we want every practitioner that's in a hub, whatever organisation they work in, to respond. I think we've coined a new phrase of recognise, react and respond to domestic abuse when it comes in as a perpetrator, a victim or a child that comes into any of those kind of hubs in any of our environments. There's a risk of insufficient survivor engagement because we are always trying to get new survivors and new victims to come and talk to us. We try and work with the health services around their victim, not victim, but their patient information, so we can get more, because every organisation will have feedback from their people that use their services, and we're trying to drill into that, find out which ones were domestic abuse victims or perpetrators. So we've got a real good picture. We're really short on LGBT voices in that arena. We do have older people, we do have male victims. LGBT is a big, huge one. So anybody that can tap into those resources, please do point them in our direction. And we're looking at how we can remunerate lived experience voice as well. We do some training, we earn some income from that. So we're looking at keeping that as a little pot and working with adult social care. I believe they've got something that we can work out. So the final slide is just the recommendations that we're asking. It's kind of a for information, but it's also just the ask that you help us strengthen that data quality so that we get that dashboard integration, so that we've got all of that information and we can get over those barriers that seem to be there. Expand our rural outreach pathways. We're working with community outreach team for Shropshire Council. We're touching base with the what are they called? Begins with an S that work with the, no, it doesn't even begin with it. Anyway, we're working with people who cannot think what it's called, attached from GP practices, social prescribers, that's what I'm looking for, thank you. So we're trying to re-engage with them again to see what we can do to get those rural outreach pathways in place. We want to formalise social voice in all commissioning, so we're asking you to think about that in your own areas and to, agree to do that in your own workforce, and to enhance cross-sector workforce training. It's a cost to some people, and what we're seeing in outside of Shropshire Council, we're seeing people saying, yes, I want to do that training on coercive controlling behaviour. Oh, there's a cost, so I'm not going to do it because of budgets. So people are then not coming on the training, so we're then not able to give them the learning from statutory reviews and all of that kind of stuff. So we're asking you as a board to actually prioritise that and enable those people to come, or collectively look at putting some money in a budget so we don't need to charge, and looking at how we can do it differently.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for that very comprehensive run through. And so I know that we've got one or two questions, but I'd just like to ask you, is your strategy linked to the violence against women and girls initiatives?
Yes, in part. So the strategy references the violence against women and girls strategy and lots of other things on the back page, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But yes, it is in part to do with that. Violence against women and girls is much broader than the domestic abuse element. So where the domestic abuse side of it is, it absolutely is aligned. We're also trying to pick up some of the sexual abuse and violence stuff from the VOG strategy.
Yes, aligned and linked.
Aligned and linked, yes.
Correct. Thank you. Claire.
Wendy, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. I think there's probably more we can do through the neighbourhood route and some of the place-based, particularly around the rural pathways. You've always got some links with social prescribing, but I do think, given the push from the 10-year plan and the new neighbourhood framework that's just landed, I think there's more that we could probably do. So I'd really value a conversation with you about just linking some of those things up and where we can kind of point you in the right direction, and use some of the left shift funding that we've got for 26-27 to start thinking about how do we link training into all our frontline practitioners through maybe our training hub so that people can access it, how we can train, make sure we've got to training through the women's health hubs. So we've got access points which are aligned to the children and family hubs. I think there's a lot more. I always talk about knitting of it together to really create something that everybody's kind of pushing in the same direction. So I can certainly help with that if we pick an action.
Linking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just ask you from the chair, are you able to articulate the amount of that additional funding?
I can. It is £2.9 million that we have for next year for left shift, but we just need to work out how and best to spend that money so that we get the best value for it, because we're in danger of going, we'll do a little bit over here, we'll do a little bit over there. So we just need to make sure we've got a proper strategic approach to aligning that funding. So I'm glad Rachel's nodding.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. And can you just confirm that's for community activities generally or more specifically?
It's called left shift funding, and it is specifically to move more services access into community, primary and voluntary and community sector. So really focusing on prevention, early help intervention, so that we're moving people away, improving health literacy, all of those things that we want to think about. So we've only just started to look at how we start to shape what that funding is spent on.
And that will be joint with the local authority.
It absolutely will be done in partnership, and of course it's Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, so we've got to share it across too as well.
Great. Thanks very much. David Shaw.
Thank you. I think really useful presentation, Wendy. I just want to add my support to the multi-agency training work you've outlined there. We're certainly exploring and considering that as we move into working together. The update that's come through literally yesterday into where we are on the Families First work. So I think from a children's safeguarding partnership perspective, we've had some challenges previously around what our core mandatory training expectations are across the partnership. And given the shift to more people, organisations and professionals in being involved in lead practitioner work, we need to ensure a greater clarity, consistency and strength of quality in their practice and what we expect them to show in their practice. So I think this is a good opportunity to do that. My ears pricked up, Claire, when you described that funding. I think there's a conversation we can have around that in that space. That's really useful. And again, just to echo my support as well for the data work and looking at Jess and colleagues over there, we see that as a really good opportunity to get much more preventative and early indicators around risks that we see in other areas. And actually, if we can get into that space, so we can generally start to preempt if we can and intervene early, that's where we need to be rather than waiting for things to happen. So no, thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much, David. Ruth Houghton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wendy, for the presentation, which is really helpful. I just want to follow on from David actually on the performance dashboard and sort of ask if there's an indication of potential timescales for that. And I note that mental health is the sort of emerging issue from survivors, but would the dashboard pick up any links with drug and alcohol misuse as well, so that we have a comprehensive picture? Because when we look at children's safeguarding, the two are very closely linked.
So in terms of timeline on the dashboard, we've got loads already into the dashboard. So there's lots of little things in there. What we're still waiting on is still improving that from our partners, the external. We get from our commission services. We've got lots of information from our commission services, but not necessarily like from SAF or from other places. So the ask is that that's coming. We can't really put a timeline on that because we've been asking for it for a long time. So we're hoping that coming to a forum like this, that encourages the strategic leads here to encourage their staff to then start actually talking to us through our operational and our partnership board, because then we could put a time on it. So I can't give you a final time, but we are presenting every quarterly DALB the updated version of where we're at. Internally, the biggest area that we're missing is adult social care and early help. So the data has been confirmed that we can have it, but I think there's some blockages in the middle of getting that kind of through. So it's in process. But externally, there are still a lot of partners that we're not receiving things from, and MPFT would be one of those partners. So we're not getting things through, but that could be because of the way they collect. I don't know, but we're not in the position of having those conversations. So anybody that has anything to do with MPFT, that would be helpful to point in that direction. terms of drug and alcohol, that's a long-standing conversation that myself and Gordon have had for a long time, and now Sean. With regard to services aren't necessarily collecting the data around substance use in the way that we can collect it into our systems. And we also need to consider the double counting of how we track an individual, so we don't have, you know, we can have a best true reflection as possible, because some people will have started at drug and alcohol and then come into DA services and vice versa. At the moment, it's not great, but it's definitely something that we're working on and all committed to get better at, from both the DA services showing for drug and alcohol and likewise the other way. And when they present their JSNA, you'll be able to see that there isn't enough in there, and we certainly haven't got enough in our needs assessment either. So it's a work in progress, but we are talking and we are sitting next to each other, so we are friends. So hopefully we'll get there.
Thank you, Wendy. Can I just press a little bit on the dashboard? Is the dashboard actually up and running in a limited capacity? Is that what you're saying? Yes. And so members of this board would have access to that, and perhaps you
not members of this board, members of the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board would have access to it at this current time. Yes.
So general members of this board wouldn't, for confidentiality reasons. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily confidentiality, because it's all anonymised, but it just hasn't been shared anywhere because it's still being built at this stage. So we're sharing it with the DAO to get feedback and comments about the way it looks, but we haven't shared it wider than that at this stage.
Well, perhaps you might do that, and also I wonder if you could articulate on the what you feel the blockers are in a general way.
In terms of
you said that some of the that putting the data on is subject to some blockers.
Okay, I think it's to do with the this is my limited understanding. I think Jess might even be more able to answer that. I think it's the limited understanding the owner of the data giving the right permissions for then the information to be pulled from one area into another area and built into a dashboard. Is that a fair summary, Jess?
Yeah, that's fair. I think from external partners, our biggest issue is formatting of data and then sharing and trying to then integrate that together. So it's just slow. It's knowing, you know, we're sharing so much data between partners, but we need to find an effective way of doing that. One single version of the truth. So we're just pulling all from the same source. And we're also working on the single view of a child, which will also eventually be a single view of a resident or adult, which will pull together all our data to give that single view, which will really enable that in the future.
What I was getting at is how to pull levers to get that solution quickly.
I think it's advocacy from the leads, the business intelligence leads, and the asset owners in partners to get that across the line, because we've got buy-in from other levels. It's just the higher levels we need.
Thank you. Perhaps a further conversation outside of this meeting.
Chair, if I could just come in there, so I think that's a really good point. So I think, Jess, what we would be asking the Wellbeing Board to support is if there are blockers within individual organisations, that senior colleagues around this table take that lead to unblock those things. So if we are getting challenges around releasing data, wherever that may well be, we take the ownership to unblock that. So I think, Jess, if you could share where you believe those blockers are, what those issues look like with me, I'm happy to liaise with Wellbeing Board members and other partners.
Thank you, David. And clearly, then the board is not only making recommendations but trying to lubricate the machinery. So, Jeffrey.
Hi, Wendy. It's great, and your service is really appreciated, certainly with my advisors and the help and support you give to our clients. So you referenced having more contact or more representation on the partnership board with the voluntary and community sector. Is that what you said, more feedback or more connection with them? How can the voluntary sector help you or be part of that?
So the operational forum, we absolutely welcome anybody from any area that's working across the voluntary and community sector, as well as partners and statutory partners. I think there are representatives there from the different voluntary and community sectors. So I can link you to Kate, who chairs that operational forum, so that can be passed out, and that can be for frontline practitioners and managers as well. It's about sharing of what's going on in the community, and then how are we going to embed some of these action planning, how we're going to do the doing, basically. So at the partnership board, I'm just trying to think. I don't know that we have anybody, so we would welcome if you would like to join that partnership board. The chair, Laura Fisher's on this call as well. I'm sure she won't mind me volunteering that, but I'm sure we would welcome representative from yourself or Partners in Care or anybody else that feels that from that strategic level at the partnership board, we would welcome input from the wider sector for sure.
Thank you. We have a very active mental health forum as well, so you might be able to link in that.
I've been to that a few times and presented to them, yeah, for sure. So, yeah,
that's great. And then just my question to Claire, with the prevention money, yes, you're going to be everybody's best friend, but my comment is what connections.
You mean I'm not already?
No, you are. Yeah, but just the question about how the voluntary sector will be involved in the discussions around that left shift. I mean, you might already be. I haven't been to the last catch-up meeting you've had with the VCS, but.
No, I was going to bring it up at the next. So obviously, I have the joint meeting with the Shropshire Alliance and now the Telford and Wrekin Alliance as well. So we'll pick it up through that forum.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just confirm that the VCSA will be the strategic organisation that you'll be liaising with? Is that correct? Yep. Thank you. Rachel.
Yeah, I think it's just to reiterate a couple of the points. I think Claire picked up what I was going to say around the importance around neighbourhoods, and this links to the Health and Wellbeing Boardship session that we had a few weeks ago, where we said absolutely going forward, recognising the 10-year plan, and I think we need to work collaboratively around what we mean by neighbourhoods, hubs, and how we align that, because as Claire said, what we've recognised is, and we've had this at the Health and Wellbeing Board previously, there's lots of great work, but it's now about how we knit it together and have that strategic direction, which obviously we've committed to doing across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin collectively, and then agreeing how that needs to link in place. So I think I was just wanted to reiterate, this is a really good example of how important it is to link in some of the things we're going to talk about today, drugs and alcohol, mental health and domestic abuse, into those conversations, so that we've got that's all together, and that's the purpose of where we're trying to get to, isn't it, in terms of the strategic direction. So I think there's an action outside of this board to come back to the board with that kind of that framework around that. So it is, as Claire said, coordinated. The workforce training, again, I think picking up that, there's a lot of work going on. This is a priority of the board, isn't it, in terms of workforce and how we have a collaborative approach. We've had conversations here before. It was a gap in our session last month about the AAA work we do, Ask, Assist and Act, and how we use that framework. So I think we're kind of using to make sure that everybody's trained, and then there's a specific training for those staff that need it. So I think you've given us a bit of a push in how do we really make sure that's a bit more joined up collaboratively again, rather than those conversations. And then the other bit I just wanted to flag is obviously one of the purposes of putting these three things on the agenda is because mental health, domestic abuse and drugs and alcohol we often talk about together. We picked up, I think, at the last meeting where we brought these, just around making sure there's links. There's some good work around pathways, I believe, going on, and it's just keeping the board, I think, updated to make sure that those pathways are working and those improved conversations, because we know that sometimes they, as you described, they don't always work in the way they should. I don't know if there's any update on that work, particularly to join up those three pathways.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you, Wendy, for that excellent presentation, and for all the members for the rich and productive discussion that we've had from it. And we look forward to receiving the strategy report and more details of your action planning. The dashboard will be quite useful, and details of the work of the workshops. And so we're asked to support data sharing, and we've certainly discussed that and had a resolution with regard to that. Thank you, David. Enabling rural outreach by offering community spaces and championing survivor inclusive commissioning across all partner organisations. And so do we have a proposer for that, please? Thank you, David. And a seconder? Claire, thank you. And those in favour, members of the board? Thank you. Any against? No abstentions? Thank you. That's unanimously carried. Thank you very much, Wendy. So we move on now to drugs and alcohol strategy, and Sean Morris is kindly going to take us through that. Thank you, Sean.
Hopefully this is going to work and share. I'd like to follow that one. Thank you, Wendy, for that comprehensive overview. And like Wendy says, we are working closely with in the mental health and the domestic abuse world as well. And like Rachel said, we have a project that's ongoing around looking at the pathways and having a joint working protocol together. That's a piece of work that's ongoing. It's trying to move a big ship. It's not something that we can do overnight, and I think it's also a national thing that we're also trying to be making changes here. But anyway, on to drug and alcohol world. What I thought I'd provide today was a bit of an overview of what the service looks like, and a few areas that we're working on. As I understand it, in the May Health and Wellbeing Board, we're working on our JSNA at the minute, and an overview from that will be coming in May, because we're working on that at the minute. So it's very much a live piece of work. But what I'm going to share today is some public available data off the NDTMS site, which is the National Drug Treatment Monitoring System, followed by some of the pieces of work that we're doing. Okay, so just to give a bit of an overview of what drug and alcohol support looks like in Shropshire. And on each of these slides, I've put a comparator of England and the West Midlands numbers. So you've got a bit of an idea of what does that mean in the national or regional context. So over the last few years, at this point in time, we are seeing the highest number of people in drug and alcohol treatment, and that's being mirrored across National and West Midlands. And Shropshire's numbers, at this point in time, we've got just over 1,700 people in drug and alcohol treatment within Shropshire, which is, at last count, this is the highest that it's ever been in Shropshire. Whilst that kind of sounds like a scary figure, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we've got more people in treatment. Same for young people. You might be aware of some recent media campaigns around the number of young people accessing treatment support. Again, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. More people are seeking help and support with their drug or alcohol use. But again, also across England, West Midlands, and Shropshire's no different. We've seen an uptick of the number of young people in treatment. Just to give you an idea of what, I don't know, sorry, it's a bit of an eye test this slide is, but just to give you an idea of what substances people are presenting to our services with are against, again, England and regional. The numbers for alcohol have shown a very, very steady rise, whereas the numbers for opiates have reduced over the course of time. These are percentages of a proportion of the number of people in treatment. So what we're seeing nationally, regionally and locally, the number of people seeking support for opiates are reducing over time. And the numbers for alcohol and notably cocaine are seeking support, increasing numbers over the course of time. The numbers around opiates still very much important. A good chunk of our people who use our services are in support for opiate use. We think that's around. It's seen as an older cohort of users who are using opiates. It's not a fashionable drug for younger people who access our services. So that was for adults, whereas for substance use in young people, what we've seen, again, England, West Midlands and Shropshire, we see a decreasing amount of young people accessing support around cannabis as a primary drug. The difference we see here in Shropshire is a bigger proportion of young people accessing services for support around alcohol, which isn't seen in England or West Midlands. And we've got to be a little bit careful with the figures here, because with the number of young people in service, we've got just over 110 young people. So you could have a change of 5 people will mean almost 5%. So where we're seeing here that around just over 20% of young people presenting to service are looking for support around alcohol, that means around 20 to 25 people. So not huge amounts, but it's still something that's different from the national trends and regional trends that we're seeing. As for people who are exiting the service, again, what we're seeing across England, West Midlands and in Shropshire are increases in both those who are successfully completing and those who are also dropping out of service. Now, I mentioned on that first slide, the number of people in treatment are increasing. Therefore, the number who are successfully completing and dropping out of service are also increasing at a similar speed. So whilst that looks worrying in one way, also more people are successfully completing as well as dropping out. As for treatment exits for young people, what we're seeing in Shropshire, we've seen increased numbers of people into treatment, but that also means that we're having an increase in successful treatments for children and young people as well. Now, this slide, I wanted to provide a bit of an update on the pieces of work that are ongoing. That we are doing in the drug and alcohol world. And what I want to get across, I think, is this year is going to be a really exciting year for the drug and alcohol world. We've got a number of pieces of work that we're working on that are helping us understand the landscape, understand what we need to put in place for the future and what we can develop also for the year ahead. So I mentioned at the start that we're developing and updating our joint strategic needs assessment, and have been doing some engagement alongside that. We're reaching a point where it's being finalised over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll be coming back to the Health and Wellbeing Board in May to present the findings from that. As part of that JSNA work, we have been engaging with many partners. We've been hounding many of your organisations already to inform this piece of work. We've worked with people who have accessed the service, so people who have been supported by drug and alcohol services, to get their feedback into what they thought of the services, where there could be areas for development and bits also that are working really well. We've been asking the professional networks around their thoughts and feelings around the service, whether we've got the service in the right places, whether we're supporting people in the right areas, whether we need to consider what the footprint for our services look like and where we need to deliver it. There's a whole host of parts of the JSNA and the engagement work that we've been doing that will inform what we put out to tender in the future, which brings me on to recommissioning. In summer of this year, we will be going out to tender for the next drug and alcohol service, and apologies, there's an error in this line. So we're looking to put this out around summer this year, so probably June, July time, to begin in April 27. I think I probably missed out the word end. So end. So the current service will be in place until March 27, where from April 27 onwards, we'll have commissioned a new service to begin there. We're doing some work at the moment to engage with, and have done work as part of the JSNA to engage with people to see what service we should put in place next. We're also doing some engagement with other services, and for example, we're looking to do some work with Shrewsbury around engaging with parents and carer networks, engaging with people who are using services, to make sure what we put in place next and what we commission is reflective of the needs of Shropshire for the future. So recommissioning is will be one of the most important things that happens over the next year for Shropshire, and understanding what we need next and what we'll put in place. We have a project board that's attended by many partners as well to develop and support this piece of work. The reset service, which Gordon and I came here last year to talk about the reset service, which is the service to support people who are rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping. This will also be considered alongside the recommissioning and form part of that recommissioning activity. So there's two big parts of the drug and alcohol service that are going to be commissioned over the course of the next year. Some other areas that we're working on at the minute, with the recent opening of 70 Castle Foregate, lots of people are involved in the first community detox in that setting, which is fantastic and worked out really well for the individual. Lots of people involved there from the Rough Sleepers team, from the drug and alcohol service, that made that a success, and one of the first one and of many, which which has been and worked really well for that individual. What it meant was that individual was able to be detoxed in the community, and following that was able to go into residential rehab. And so that's been a really good start for the temporary accommodation at 70 Castle Foregate. We're also revising and looking at our local drug information system, how we share intel and intelligence around our partners. We've got a professional information network where we'll share updates around concerns or trends that we're seeing, and also reviewing our drug and alcohol related death panels. So we held our first panel last month, and this is where we'll be reviewing drug and alcohol related deaths and suicides. I think on our suicide one, I think it's next week. And the point of that activity is that no drug or alcohol related deaths or suicides should be in vain, and we should learn in order to inform the system for the future. So that's something we've begun doing, and we're also having some training around how to make sure we make best use of these sessions and learn what we can and share and disseminate what we can as well. We've got a blue light project working group where we're looking at those who are most frequently attending hospital A&Es, and we're looking to we're working with the professionals who are supporting those individuals and seeing how we best support them, so they to understand why they're frequently presenting to A&Es, and supporting professionals with some training from Alcohol Change UK around how we better support people who are frequently attending in the future, and being able to share and learning and inform how we support people better in the future. And lastly, we're having, and I have undertaken a series of webinars. So recently we had a successful webinar about ketamine, which was attended by, I think, just over 150 professionals to understand how we can better support specific client groups. Ketamine, I think we've all seen on the news about this increase in the number or presentation or the numbers of people using ketamine and the physical health problems that brings with it. So there's real interest from professional networks around ketamine at the moment, and we're trying to provide a series of webinars over the next year and years ahead to help and support professionals in their understanding of the clients when they present, who they can refer to, and how they can support them better as well. Finally, it'd be remiss to say if you've yourselves, friends, parents, guardians, or otherwise, with a role supporting people in Shropshire concerned about alcohol or substance use, then our commission provider, which is With You, also known as Shropshire Recovery Partnership, they provide free and confidential advice and support, and there's a link within the slides to take you to their page where if you need to seek help and support for someone you may be working with. Other than that, thank you for your time and supporting this. I will add on the end of here is that I mentioned about certain groups that we're looking to work with and engage with. This is kind of an open offer. If you think you're working with a cohort of people who may be interested in feeding into the commission service in the future, then do get in touch with myself, Gordon, because we at this point in time, it's very much a live piece of work that we're reviewing and revising our specification for drug and alcohol services, and having your support or engagement around this would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. A lot of excellent work being done. And your numbers seem to be proportionally greater than the national average, which is great that you're getting people into treatment. A couple of things I just wondered if you could elucidate. With regard to young people who use alcohol, why do you think that there's more in Shropshire than there is in the than in other parts of the country? The second one is with regard to adults, and that historically there was an excellent proportion of people who had exited treatment were completing, and that now seems to be about 50%. Finally, I just wondered whether you liaise with some of the more informal groups and individuals within an urban setting. They are the rangers and pastors, street pastors, with regard to seeing if there's any people that would need your help.
Thank you, Councillor. Alcohol use in young people, we're not entirely sure why that's the case, but it's something our drug and alcohol provider is looking into and working with them to try and better understand that. Like I mentioned, we've seen a downturn in cannabis across Shropshire nationally. Not sure why alcohol is increasing specifically. Another thing that we've is in the media around ketamine in younger people. Again, making sure that training is available for professionals to help and support people working with children and young people and adults, so they're well informed about the referral routes and so on. But the alcohol one we're looking into, and we're not entirely sure why that's the case.
I don't think it may be ease of access.
Possibly. Alcohol is, yeah, like I say, it's available, whereas other drugs aren't as such. Adults treatment, we're again working with the providers to understand, and we've had a recent visit from the Office of Health Improvement Disparities to come and have a conversation with us and help and support us understand why this may be the case. But we're working with the provider. What we're also doing is building and developing dashboards to help us and the provider understand performance, and also to try and get down to the bottom of why some of these things are happening in service and why Shropshire is different in elements than it is in other areas of the country. So around the adults in treatment, obviously the more people you get into treatment, the more people you'll have successfully complete, and also the more will drop out. But it's something we're looking into.
Could you elucidate a little bit further? Have you had any initial responses from those providers as to why the trend seems to be adverse?
At this point in time, we're working with them on how they engage people who are falling out of treatment in the early parts. So I think the higher the numbers you get into treatment, the more difficult it will be to engage with those who are interested in treatment and recovery. One of the things that we are seeing is that people seem to be dropping out within the first 12 weeks, and this is also an indicator that OHID and Ashley is so what we're trying to do is understand why people are dropping out in the first 12 weeks of treatment. We're working with the provider on looking at how they engage with individuals. It's not a case of 3 calls and then you're exited from treatment because we can't get in touch with you, but looking at their re-engagement processes and processes around individuals who don't attend their appointments or are difficult to engage, and considering things around outreach and being more assertive in that approach as well.
Thank you.
But I think it's those first 12 weeks are where we in Shropshire have difficulty, and it's something we're focusing on.
Thank you. And the bit about some of the unofficial groups, the rangers and street passers.
Yeah, our drug and alcohol provider, they do engage with local street pastors and receive and support get intel from that group and do engage with them also.
Thank you. Janessa.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sean. Really interesting presentation and informative paper. The one of my, well, firstly, I think we have to recognise the link with the CSP work that's already been presented here today, and about how that illustrates the disruption of drugs coming into the system. So it's about working, it really illustrates the working together. And the data's great on more people coming into service and into the services that you commission. But I wonder, what is the message about how do we get even more in? And we know there's people that don't access services and they're maybe found through maternity pathways and other routes. And I just wondered about how do we get earlier intervention in, and what would be the message you'd want to leave the people here today to get out to their respective organisations. Thanks.
Around, yeah, the connection to CSP is important. A good chunk of work happens around the criminality element of it. And I guess my focus today was more around the treatment and recovery. Mm-hmm. They all work together and have strong links. But thinking about the early intervention prevention, I think that's something that often we focus on the treatment element of service. And I think the early intervention and harm reduction part of the service is something that we need to focus on. And I think as part of our recommissioning, what we've done, we had some market engagement events and speaking to providers from all around the country. And there's very much a feeling of we need a stronger focus on harm reduction. Not to say that we don't do that at the minute. We have needle exchange services, we have opiate substitutes, but I think there's a feeling of moving towards harm reduction, early intervention and prevention. Thinking about education is a really important part of all of this, how we get into schools and how that forms part of recovery. Not recovery, forms part of early intervention. So that's something that has been made aware to us and something that will form greatly in what how we work in the future.
Thank you. Ruth, Councillor Woodhousen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a really helpful presentation. It's just to go back to your questions, Chair, around alcohol and young people, and in particular, are you able to define that by locality, and linked to that, is there any enforcement action around sales to prevent access for young people? And then what are we doing around education and training? Because this week we've had some really helpful conversation about how we develop our youth offer through the LGA, and this seems a sort of sensible thing to link to it somehow. I mean, it's not going to be as much fun as a youth club, but once the youth club's established, it's getting that information in there. And I think well, the councillor group in the morning, we sort of concluded that our local plan needs to be a bit stronger on those services for young people, and I think this is some of the evidence to support that.
A couple of questions, thank you. Access to alcohol and licensing, that's something we are actively looking at the moment, working with our licensing department on. I think previously we haven't had, from a public health perspective, a lot of involvement around licensing applications that come through, but we're revising how we're involved in that, what steps we can take, for example, working with A&E departments to understand where somebody has attended A&E where alcohol is a contributing factor and where they originated from, to understand where harm is potentially happening across the county. In relation to localities and where people are presenting from, we have a very granular detail around understanding exactly where people are and where there are hotspots across the whole of the county for access and where people are accessing services from. So we have a really good level of detail around local level figures and information. And that will also form part of hopefully what we'll present to you in May in the JSNA feedback, and we'll better give you a bit of more info around that at that point. Education and training, welcome any help and support around our understanding or opportunities to feed into the education world and how we can be part of that. So perhaps something I can pick up outside of it, that'd be really helpful. Education school is not something I don't think we as a missionary service do enough of at the minute, and it's something we want to pick up in the next commission service. So any help around that would be really supportive if possible. Also, going back to Vanessa, I didn't answer the other question. My mind went blank in between the two things, thinking about CSP and early intervention. You asked about numbers into treatment and increasing that. I think a few years ago there was very much with an increase in our funding through the Dane Carroll Black Review, there was a big focus on increasing numbers into treatment, more and more people into treatment. Whereas I think the shift, what we're seeing now, is about quality of service. And once people are in treatment, so I mentioned before about people who are dropping out in those first 12 weeks, it's about the quality of the intervention, I think, is the focus that's shifting from on a national level, and where we get our funding from through the public health grant, through OHID. They want to see how we're focusing on quality more so than numbers, which is really welcome turn from central government, which is great because we can focus on the recovery element of it rather than just getting as many people in as possible, because we may be contacting people or trying to bring people in who aren't quite ready. So making that delivery and quality of service when someone's potentially through the front door is the real focus for drug and alcohol services, like nationally going forward.
Thank you very much, Sean. I do have 5 people wanting to speak or ask questions, so I won't take any more, and we'll finish at 10:02 as planned. So Nigel Lee, thank you.
Thank you. So really useful. I suppose 2 quick points. The first one, obviously, you just mentioned that interrelationship with A&E and the acute hospital services. Please let me know if you need any smoothing of that. I suppose, as you've alluded to, sometimes accident emergency departments will end up being a default if there's not something available urgently. But I think you've illustrated really well how an acute hospital is not the right place for much of this of activity. Of course, it's the right place to address acute medical needs, but not to support those patients. And I think there's ongoing. I know Rich and I have discussed it, just in recent weeks around how we continue to showcase and communicate the right pathways, especially to people like general practice and others. I think the second one was just linking to also Ruth's question as well. It's again possibly another indicator, certainly as a health and wellbeing board, that we can use to cross-reference other challenges that we're seeing, whether that's health inequalities, whether it's wider inequalities, and of course that nicely links back to how we, as a set of partners, are wrapping care around communities, and the neighbourhood health framework obviously is the very recent reinforcement of that. So I think there'll be bigger, cleverer people than me that will be able to cross-reference that information. But that's something, again, we continue to be really intelligence-led, don't we, for the right reasons. This is a really specific and important example, but how we wrap that together is going to be great.
Thanks very much, Nigel, and clearly just underlines the importance of the systems working together, all of the partners for our common outcome. So Natalie, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Really helpful report. In terms of your future planning and modelling, I think a lot of services are starting to really understand the prevention, education, early intervention part, and I think people really understand the treatment, the access to treatment part. It'd be really good to get a sense from you in terms of that future planning around risk management of people that are going to use substances on an ongoing basis. They're not ready to think about treatment. They're not receptive to that idea. And when I talk about the risk management, I'm thinking of things like, people that might not engage but could really benefit from people understanding the importance of health checks, living conditions. We know the links with mental health, because I think that's sometimes a part that we can really miss out. There are people that may continue to drink alcohol or use substances for a really long period of time, and it's often that risk management. Years ago it was needle exchange, wasn't it, and things like that seemed a really radical idea. But sometimes how do we work with people that may not be ready to seek treatment, but actually as a partnership we've got a really good opportunity to think about how we're helping people while they're using substances to manage those risks. So it'd be just good to kind of weave that into that future planning.
Sorry, I was going to say some of the training that we put out recently around ketamine, cognitive around alcohol, been really, really well attended by social care teams, health teams, amongst others, who are working with people who aren't, like you say, necessarily ready or wish to be supported by drug and alcohol services, but then have some understanding and an insight into how you can support someone who isn't yet ready, and maybe building up rapport or making that next step. And that series of training webinars is something that's been really, really well received, to the extent where other local authorities are coming to us, which is great, and asking about it. So it's something we really want to push and have a calendar of events available, and not just a one short, sharp shot, is have recurring events for new social workers and so on. In the case, we'll want to take advantage of that training. So something, I know we've also got a lot of social care on our project boards as well for looking at future services. So yeah, absolutely want to be involved and be able to share that.
Thank you very much. And so we're going to move online now to Ben Holland.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Really great presentation. And also just to offer any support, if we're not engaged as mental health services, then do let me know and see if we can sort of smooth the way there. Obviously, there's a lot of intersectionality with those things. And similar point, really, just very briefly, around kind of co-occurring physical health needs and what that might look like into the future of this new specification. Many people in those services will have those co-occurring health needs, respiratory problems in particular, and just wondered whether that was something which was being considered in terms of that sort of integrated approach into the future.
Thank you, Ben. We have and are working with a couple of contacts from the MPFT and mental health world, which is great, who are on board with help and supporting also through the reset work that we do, which is great. So also as part of our drug and alcohol treatment and recovery service, we do have things like or work with social prescribing health checks that go alongside the work that they do, and it's something that we also want to make sure is in place in the future. Thinking about smoking, thinking about vaping is something else we want to make sure is on the agenda that works alongside our drug and alcohol service. So there's a number of things we are looking at, but we're taking an integrated approach to this, and we are grateful of the couple of colleagues we have from yourselves and in health who are involved in this piece of work too. But thank you for the offer as well, and be in touch if there's anything that you feel that you might use your support in.
Thank you very much, Sean. I think that Ben was offering active collaboration, and so it would be, I think, optimal, considering the proportion of people who had mental health issues, if that could be explored both centrally at MPFT in its head office and perhaps locally in Shropshire and Shrewsbury.
Yeah. We do, like I say, we work with both MPFT and certain individuals within the health, but also sorry if I misunderstood the question there, Bernie.
No, it's just that I think Ben was alluding to the possibility of closer working.
Yeah. And I think some of this is coming out as part of the pathways and protocol work that we're doing as well.
Jointly with MPFT.
Yes.
Yeah. So can we move on to Gordon Quay? Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reiterate there, we are working closely with MPFT through the integration of substance use with mental health and domestic abuse. So that conversation is ongoing, and we do welcome, Ben, your support with that as well. It was just a quick one for me, picking up on something that was said earlier. I think it's possibly been answered since then, but just to raise awareness through our Tackling Drug Alcohol partnership, one of the offers that we have agreed with others is an informal awareness session, if you will, about what the drug alcohol service is, what partners' role could be in terms of that brief conversation, that brief making every contact count, particularly when we do recognise there is still a stigma associated with drugs and alcohol, and it can be a difficult conversation to have, particularly where it's not your primary role and you have that relationship with the individual. So what could that look like? What could that conversation involve? And what does a professional referral look like? It is very simple, but again, it's demystifying that. So there is an opportunity, if any of our teams, any of our services would be interested, please do reach out. That's something we can look at organising.
Thank you very much, Gordon. David Shaw, is it? So
thank you.
Brief.
Very 3 points. So, Sean, very happy to support the ask in terms of engaging with education settings of all phases to get the word out there. And also, second point, can you make sure that information that you've got data-wise around maps and locations is shared with colleagues? Because I think that'd be really helpful for us to understand where adults may be undergoing treatment and support. So we're just using cross-referencing around child in need plans, child protection plans, etc. That, you know, connections around support there. And then I think finally my question was just going to be around, or comment was going to be around the data. I can see we've used counts or population proportions here. I'd just be interested in seeing what this looks like, perhaps at a rate level, whether that's available, just so we can more accurately compare statistical neighbours, our position with national. I'm just slightly concerned, as you said, the rises in young people with a count can be quite stark, when actually, when you compare that, that may not be the case. So just interested in understanding that a bit more, really.
The maps and locations and more detailed local information will be included within our JSNA. So, like I said, we can get this down to a granular level, exactly where everyone who is receiving support from the services. Yeah, all of that information. We're incredibly fortunate in the drug and alcohol world that we have the National Drug Treatment Monitoring System. We can compare our areas to anywhere that's statistically similar neighbours across the region, nationally, and so on. So anything around that, if you think that there's elements that you're especially interested in, you'd like to have a discussion about, more than happy to have a conversation and work with our insights team to facilitate it.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Sorry, very quickly, because a lot of this has been covered. Thank you for bringing the presentation. I think we haven't had this at the Health and Wellbeing Board for some time, so it's really good and timely, given the recommissioning, to give everybody an overview and that offer to members as well. So through Hoskin, that engagement is really welcome. I think for me, I want just to flag a couple of things. One is around, I am sorry, but I am a broken record around this neighbourhoods, that strategic work and that join up, because actually in answer to getting people into treatment and understand that locality basis, I think that is another opportunity where we could make partners and others aware sort of the services. Again, I know we're constantly getting those messages out, but that locality working, how we work together in neighbourhoods is really important. And this is a really important service that we want to make sure is linked in, but can't be everywhere. But how it's those links, isn't it? It's fundamental. So just to bring that in, and I think back to Sean's point, we are getting those of us into treatment, but actually the issue is really, which is the work and the deep dive that's been done, is around actually some people are dropping out quickly, but once they're in treatment, they're getting a really high quality of service and are staying in treatment, which is really good for Shropshire. So it's getting those referrals, the right referrals, that done in the right way. And again, that comes back to the neighbourhood working, and I think that's a bit of the work around the board, is really making sure that yes, we do get the right people. They know that support's available, getting the right type of referral, because once they're in, they're getting that good quality of service. And again, I'm just going to keep banging on about that, because I said it at the start, all of these link in, and that's the way we maximise, and we're not duplicating some of the work, which is my biggest worry.
Thank you, Rachel. And I would echo that. Family and community hubs and neighbourhood health are extremely important parts of our journey over the next decade, and the faster we can move to those, the better. Thank you. So we just asked to note the contents of the report, and thank you very much, Sean, for the presentation and for fielding the questions. So we're going to move on now to an equally important issue, and that is suicide prevention. And Gordon Kuchain, Public Health Consultant, is kindly going to make a presentation. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you. Do we have some slides that we can share as well, please, Louisa? So thank you for inviting me here today to talk about our current position with the suicide prevention agenda. So hopefully people have had the chance to look at the report. So I won't spend too long going through this presentation, just to give us more opportunity for discussion afterwards. But if we can move to the next slide, please. So the Department of Health and Social Care fingertips data is published annually, and it looks at the 3-year average of local suicide rates. The most recent data is covering the 3-year average period 2022 to 2024. And what that's identified is that within that period, Shropshire has a higher than national average rate of suicides, and that equates to 119 deaths with a verdict of suicide. Now, one thing to note within that number is that does include people who are from out of county but have died within Shropshire, but also vice versa. And that is something that we've looked at within our data as well. And that's important because we know because numbers are small, every death by suicide has a significant impact on our rate. That being said, Shropshire is also the highest in the West Midlands in terms of our suicide rate. When we look at our comparable neighbours, our statistical neighbours with a similar geographic or demographic profile, however, we're about midway in that ranking, which indicates there is something about economies such as Shropshire, which means that we are at a higher than general population suicide risk. If we can move to the next slide, this just visualises what we said there, and appreciate it's again a little bit small, but the red arrow is pointing to Shropshire. So that top left is the comparison to the West Midlands. The bottom right is the comparison to statistical neighbours. So you can see where there's the red bar, that means the local area is higher than national average in terms of suicide rate. If we can move to the next slide, please. So we have previously brought this to Health and Wellbeing Board in terms of the audit that was undertaken of suicide deaths, but this latest reporting period actually covers similar time frame. So those same messages that we looked at previously will still apply to this specific data. And in terms of the things that we pulled out of what we know about what was happening in those individuals' lives prior to death, the common themes are presented there. Perhaps again, no surprise, relationship breakdown, impact of unmet chronic bereavement, whether that be suicide, unexpected death or other, often occurring in early years, linking to the adverse childhood experiences agenda, money worries and economic strain, as well as that link with mental health and physical health. Now, we have continued to expand our real-time surveillance system, and I'm pleased to say we have, I think it's about 20 partners who are now signed up with that. So it's a growing body of evidence for us to understand where there's been a probable or possible suicide death within the community, for us to have access and understanding sooner rather than waiting for verdict by coroner. And what that enables us to do is understand, again, what are the patterns and themes that we can start to explore. Is there a targeted response for a specific cohort or something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later? Now, within that data that we're collating from partners, what we're able to do is understand which services people were presenting at prior to death, who was known to our services. I will come on to this in a little bit more detail later, but from the themes that we've been able to pull from our most recent years, which is 2024 through to current day, aligns with what we've seen through the coroner audit. So again, the common themes presenting are around mental health conditions, whether that's diagnosed or undiagnosed, substance use, domestic abuse, all the things we've spoken about today. And I think what's really clear here, and it says this in the report as well, there's no one reason why someone may be at the point where they take their life. It can't be one service, it can't be one group, it is the role for all of us. If we can move to the next slide, please. So what I wanted to do just over the next couple of slides is an overview of some of the work that the Suicide Action Group is leading, and most of this has been in place since 2025. The group undertook a refresh of our action plan aligned with our strategy in summer of 2025, and in response to the data that's highlighted the increase in local suicide rate over the past couple of reporting periods. So the first one that the group really was keen to embed was community visibility. Again, addressing stigma, getting people talking about suicide, recognising that actually this isn't a scary word and topic. We want to encourage people to understand there is support out there, there is hope available, there are people that want to listen. But to do that, we've had to incorporate various different approaches to how we can start to really build that message. So the first one, hopefully people are aware, is through the launch of the Orange Button Community Scheme, which was launched in 2025. Now, this has been adopted by a number of local authorities across England. The intention is to recruit a network of volunteers from anywhere, ultimately, from whether it be professionals to community. The point is that we have people with good reach within all parts of our community who will be trained to provide that listening ear, brief intervention response. It's not a clinical intervention response. It's a signpost to support, and they're recognised by wearing an orange button, which, for the benefit of those in the room, looks like this. And what this indicates is that this person is happy to have a conversation about suicide with anyone who may have concerns about themselves or someone else, and to be able to do a light touch approach to raise awareness of what may be what might be helpful for your situation, or where to go for further information. So to date, we've recruited 171 Orange Button volunteers, and this is running across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, but 171 is specific to the Shropshire Local Authority area. And we have established a dedicated 3.5-hour training option, so that when people are recruited, there is a process just to make sure that people are safe and you know, everything is appropriate. But there's a pack that's provided as well. There is support available for our volunteers, but this is something we are looking to grow and expand, and I will again come on to that slightly later with the call to action. We've also done a number of events at our market towns, working with our Samaritans and our public health wellbeing outreach team, again to promote opportunity to have conversation. The Samaritans work utilises their Ending Stigma Together approach, which again is about what could a conversation look like? How can you approach those difficult topics? Again, what could your role be as a member of the public, and raising awareness of what you could do, those signposting messages, and where you could go if you do have concerns about anyone or yourself, of course. And again, we're looking to continue to work with our communities to understand, is there particular things they would appreciate locally? We can link with our voluntary sector partners and within the action group to respond, and that also includes a post-vention response. So if there has been a death within the community, we can work with our partners and with the community to understand what is an appropriate offer that people may find useful or helpful. So I would really welcome, you know, that message to be cascaded. In terms of our broader communications, we have, hopefully again, everyone's aware of our Pick Up the Phone You're Not Alone Z card, which is the wallet size, about that sort of size, that you can have a quick first point of contact as what to do, who you can contact if you have concerns around suicide. That's being refreshed by our action group across Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin at the moment to ensure it reflects all of the latest offers, including the updated Shout text line, and also recognising the safety plan approach, offers such as the NHS Stay Alive app, and a number of other things, as well as the fantastic work our partners such as Shropshire Rural Support have in terms of that reach. So that we are hoping to launch in Mental Health Awareness Week, which is coming up, I believe it's the week of the 11th of May. And alongside that, some work is being done on our online information. Predominantly the 3 websites that we are well, we have control of as the Suicide Action Group is the Healthy Shropshire page with suicide concerns around suicide, specific resources, the Shropshire Safeguarding resources for suicide and self-harm, and then there's the ICB suicide resources page as well. So those are currently being refreshed. We are keen again to engage with professionals, with people with lived experience, to really understand if you were to use this website, what's the must knows? What is it that you are looking to take away? What are the key messages that are going to be most useful for yourself, whether it is for yourself or whether you're caring for somebody else? So that work is underway at the moment, but will continue throughout the year.
Thank you very much, Gordon. This is a vitally important topic that we need to grasp and deal with. And I just wonder if you could go into a little bit of detail on one or two things. Sure. First is these themes that you talk about. Many of these is in the information contained by the GP, and could this be assembled into a risk type of matrix or score in order to identify those that might be a particular risk? And that's the first thing. The second is that is about sites where people try to commit suicide, and trying to ensure a comprehensive distribution of signs for help services, which I know is still needed in some places. The role of communications and the links between those communications. So you mentioned some of the local ones, but there's also the Samaritans, and it's, I think, difficult often to link those up. And finally, just the link with the voluntary services, which is so important.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess the first one to address, thinking about risk, is that the evidence base says that risk assessment by itself is not a good predictor of suicide. There's many people that may present with those risk themes, which end up not taking their life, but vice versa. There may be people that present with none of those themes who end up taking their life. So there's guidance that was published last year by NHS England called the Staying Safe from Suicide Guidance, which will be on the call to action, but I'd absolutely encourage everyone to look at that if you haven't already. And the approach there is the safety plan approach to supporting individuals to mitigate harm, understand the assets in their world that gives them hope. Who can they turn to in those moments where things aren't going so well, or safe spaces and places that can keep them safe for now. So in terms of that immediate keeping people safe approach, the safety plan is something that has been strongly recommended nationally and promoted locally that through that work. Sorry, was there
sites and then communications?
Yes. So with sites, absolutely. Again, this is something the group have been looking at. However, it's actually more complex than perhaps many realise, because to put signs up, we do need a good evidence base as to what incidents have occurred there. Now, up until, well, this is something we're still working on. So we've got data around suicide deaths, but what we don't have is where there's been an incident, so an attempted suicide, if you will. And that is something we are exploring with our emergency services to strengthen what that, how we can capture that in a meaningful way. I recognise there are some challenges in the systems and the databases that some of our partners utilise, so it's not an easy extract, and of course some of the nuances and subjectiveness as to whether a suicide attempt has been made. Sometimes it's more obvious than others, but nonetheless we do work with the Samaritans. We are exploring within council teams, we are exploring with our wider partners as well, if there are areas of concern, to work with us, and we will absolutely work with everyone that needs to be consulted with to explore signage. And that's something we are looking at the moment as well.
Can I just come back to you on that? And that is, you don't need to have that particular site as being one where people have committed suicide in order to raise the issue within their minds or within people's minds of the services which are available, and placing them at sites of risk of that, I think it enables people's minds to be concentrated on.
Yeah, and absolutely. As I say, it depends on the site. There are some different regulations. There's something that we looked at in the past, but the road was owned by Highways England, for example. But absolutely, it's a good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to let's do something through the neighbourhoods, because I will say that I was really interested because the themes to me don't really stand out as being any different than they would be in other areas. But when you look at the benchmarking, the rurality and rural and coastal stands out. So I've just got a few questions, or and you may do this. So we know that actually agricultural workers and farmers are at high risk of suicide. So do we have that data? And do we have the right support, I suppose? So that'll take me on to the neighbourhoods when we're thinking about people that are suffering with mental health issues or other issues aligned to the impact that the cost of living crisis has on more rural areas. Do we have the right support available through our neighbourhoods? And is that something we can look at going forward? Do we know how it's linked to employment? So not just agricultural, but other employment. And then we know that we have a higher number of military and ex-military in Shropshire. So are there any links to that? I suppose would be some of those data questions. And then you talking about the card, which I hadn't come across. Can we make sure that our social prescribers and our care coordinators through our primary care networks get that? Because in the course of training and delivery and signposting of services, I think that would be really, really helpful. And then the other thing is, just before Rachel says it, can we please link up some of this work with the neighbourhood framework, because actually that local access and that early support before somebody is struggling around loneliness, access, whatever it is, we can then link them up to the right groups and provide the right wraparound care in that earlier point. And just to say, signage wise, there's a little railway bridge up the lane from me in Hadnor, and there is a little sign on there just to say call the Samaritans. I haven't jumped off it yet.
Thank you, Claire. It was quite a detailed list of questions. Yes, okay, thank you. I just wonder whether Gordon might respond outside of this meeting, because we are already running behind time. Clearly a really important topic, and I'm going to take two more comments or questions, and then we're going to ask Gordon to sum up and move on. So Jackie Jeffrey.
Thanks, Gordon. I'm going to take my VCSA hat off and use my citizens advice hat and my with my partners, advocacy partners. So we have seen significant increases in safeguarding issues being reported to us through our advisors, with clients ringing up with suicide ideation. Absolutely linked with financial issues, a lot with mental health issues, but actually having to struggle navigating the system and getting the support that they need, the cost of living crisis, the lack of support services or access to support services to support those people with mental health issues that aren't really at the crisis point. All that prevention work is absolutely right. And we've been talking about the new Crisis and Resilience Fund that will be coming in and replacing the Household Support Fund, which is absolutely the right place to understanding where people are in crisis and that prevention. And my plea is that, putting my VCSA hat on again, is that when we talk about involvement in neighbourhoods and linking up in partnership, please remember that the VCSA needs the capacity, the resources to be able to do this, because it's not part of our day job to be here. It's not part of our day job, but actually if we want to have that, we need to have investment into the the voluntary sector to be able to be part of this. We are absolutely about prevention. We are there advocating and supporting people who you know, like last week, we were calling ambulances to support our clients. It's really vital. And so my question is, I'll be really interested to hear when we get to the shift update, what's happening with that money that's supposed to be investing in the voluntary sector to be able to respond to this. And, you know, and Gordon, we haven't talked a lot, our ability to be able to sit on all these partnerships. There's 5 partnership boards here today that we've heard from and will hear from, and our VCSA ability to be on those boards, absolutely giving you our data. I know I'll shut up in a minute, but when we looked at the Crisis and Resilience Fund, the data we were given about those people in crisis or those people in need was 2019, but we were able to give, as a voluntary sector, up to date, in time data about the issues that are affecting people, their demographics and where they live and what they're facing. So please remember the voluntary sector. Please include us in the conversations and invest in the sector so we can be part of these neighbourhood development and wraparound services.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and we do genuinely recognise the contribution of the voluntary sector and know how efficient the voluntary sector is at using the resources that are put in their way, and this administration, this council is keen to involve the voluntary sector at all possible stages. Thank you. I don't know whether we've got Wendy. And I think that's going to be the last question.
It's just an observation, really. You quoted about this staying safe from suicide and that being a document. Just to note that domestic abuse isn't mentioned at all in that document, throughout the document, and yet domestic abuse is well, there's more deaths by suicide than there are by homicide these days that are being recognised through domestic abuse, homicide reviews, etc. And I know that we work closely, but I wanted the board here to recognise that document itself, the NHS document, staying safe from suicide, does not mention domestic abuse in that. So we mustn't alone look at that work when thinking about recognising, and as you say, risk assessments don't necessarily work when it comes to victims and or perpetrators, because both use suicide as a mechanism to end their life for different reasons. We know that in the case of domestic abuse with a victim, from talking to those that have tried to end their lives by suicide unsuccessfully, but really wanted to end their lives, it's more of an impulse. So it wasn't a build-up of knowledge, it wasn't something, it was about that hopelessness coming to the point where, well, there's nothing left now, so I may as well, or the hopelessness of loss of control. So there isn't always a recognition or a way to risk assess or things to think about, which is why the orange button are really important, to be talking to somebody all the time when you know that they've got things going on, asking them, how are you feeling? What is the hope? Do you feel? And being equipped to ask that question. So I just wanted to make that kind of statement, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time, but thank you very much, Wendy, for your contribution. I'm sure Gordon will take that on board with regard to his report. And so, Gordon, you were going to sum up and
yes,
and call for action.
Yes, so I do have a slide which is part of the call to action. Apologies, I wasn't too swift with my other slides, but ultimately just building on that staying safe from suicide guidance, the key takeaway from that is around the safety plan approach, and there is some very accessible training that's free, available online, that sits behind that, which is provided by Minded. So the call to action really is for our partners to review what current approaches you're taking within your services and teams around that initial response to suicide. Is there a systematic approach, or have you adopted that safety plan model? Have you referenced the staying safe from suicide guidance, as well as the suicide strategy and that recognition of those wider risks that can contribute towards suicide risk? And to please promote that within your workforce and organisation. And alongside that, to promote the training matrix, which is around the local offers for suicide prevention, bereavement and self-harm training that have been either peer-reviewed nationally or have been utilised by the Shropshire Telford and Wrekin Suicide Prevention Network. Again, there's a link to that within our within this report, but it's on the Shropshire Safeguarding webpage as well. So please do promote that with your workforce. It enables those conversations about what is most useful for me in my role to be answered. The Orange Button Community Scheme, as we've already said, please do promote that. We do have a dedicated webpage with more information. We are looking to continue growing that. Again, any questions, if you would like more information, please reach out to myself. And then Louisa, just on the next page, I always like to end with a reminder of some first point of contact support from our services and within the community as well. So please do note this. Again, we have more resources around what can be used to communicate, share. Please do reach out if appropriate, or if you feel it would be useful to do so.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And indeed, that I was just looking at that yellow slide that you have. That would make a great sign to be put in strategic places. So, Rachel, you're going to say something. I just need to move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to summarise because I think this is really, really important. We talked about this for a number of years actually, and we haven't been able to shift the tide on this. We knew that I think out of the cost of living, as the colleagues mentioned, the continuing issues and rurality being a big factor, that we were concerned about this, and a lot of work has been done. The action group have done a fantastic work, evidence-based, to know and lead that forward, but it cannot happen, as Gordon said at the start, without our commitment. It really does feel like a call to action of all of us. I guess I would like to ask if we can bring this back to make sure that we are committing, and with our response to some of this, whether we need to take that separately. Whether I would suggest also SHIP probably need to look at this more broadly, and where there's other places that we need to take this to get that commitment, because this is everybody's commitment, and again, that commitment for us to perhaps sign up to that community scheme. But I would ask if we could bring this back as a board, because I think take this away. This is our call to action. We need to make a difference, and it's collective. It's not one individual.
Thank you, Rachel. We could perhaps talk about when that should be, so that the current strategy and action plan is going to lead to some results that we can evaluate. So the recommendations are to be aware of the actions and activities within this update, for all partners to recognise and action the attached call to action to support suicide prevention in Shropshire, including A, adoption by all organisations providing a care offer for vulnerable people in Shropshire of the staying safe from suicide guidance, along with plan to ensure the workforce have suitable knowledge and skills to support delivery of a safety plan approach when appropriate. B, raise awareness with managers, team leaders and wider workforce of the new training matrix for suicide, bereavement and self-harm, and to encourage opportunities for staff to access. Subsidised access to some training may be available for certain staff, with most reaching into community or high-risk cohorts, and please contact Gordon Cuchain for further details. To promote the Orange Button Community Scheme, both to raise awareness of what it is and support recruitment of a network of volunteers that are representative of our communities. And D, promote support available for concerns about suicide or those impacted by suicide, as highlighted in the report below and the attached document. And then 3, to agree recommendations of extending the existing Shropshire Suicide Prevention Strategy 2023 to 26 for a further 2 years to align with the National Suicide Prevention Strategy, as our priorities remain the same. And so, Board, can I ask for a mover of this motion? Thank you. And seconder? Thank you, Vanessa. And so, those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. That was a really important topic, and I would reiterate to members that could they please advertise the Orange Button Scheme and this call to action with their residents, and perhaps also undergo some training themselves. So moving on to the SEND JSNA, and Jess Edwards is going to talk us through this. Thank you.
Chair. Louisa, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to give you a high-level overview of the key findings from the SEND JSNA. I'm aware that some of you will have seen these already in other forums and boards because I have been on a roadshow a little bit the last few months. But just to highlight that this was a true partnership effort across all our partners in the system, and it took the best part of a year to pull together. We've split this out into 8 chapters, so it's digestible and it can be picked up different areas of the system, but then also having that holistic view overarching for our SEND children in Shropshire. So the real purpose of this JSNA is to inform that planning and development of local services and to support the reduction of health inequalities through early intervention and prevention, and of course through our community and family hubs and the neighbourhood health work as well. This is the vehicle delivery for the recommendations that come out of this. So if we move on to the next slide. First chapter, let's just like to highlight, I'm not going to go through all the chapters and all the detail. This slide deck is made to pick up and read yourselves. It was in the report and hopefully everyone's had a chance to read the report that's submitted. But I'll pick out some key highlights that were really pivotal to some of the recommendations forming. So firstly, for wider determinants and context, you can't quite see the top part of the slide there, but this is the first sort of chapter that gives us that what are we operating in, what are our key challenges, and these will be no surprise. Just over half our population live in rural areas, and our travel time to schools are longer than what we see on average nationally. And that map on the left there shows you in red where those hotspots are for the longer travel times to school. So quite significant travel times by public transport to things like secondary school at 28 minutes compared to 18 minutes nationally, so quite a stark finding there. We also looked at the IMD, so our deprivation index, and we looked within that because obviously if you look at Shropshire as a whole for IMD, we're not looking that bad nationally. If you look within the barriers to housing and services domain, we have the pronounced deprivation there, and that's on the right. You can see majority of our local LSOAs, which are sort of smaller areas, are in the 20% most deprived, and that obviously is all to do with barriers to access to things like education, health, retail, employment and leisure, and that's access via public transport. So a significant issue there, and this applies to all the data and insight we've seen today, so it's always just operating in that context. If we move on to the next slide. SEND population profile is another chapter in its own right, and this looks at who our special educational needs and disabilities children are, and looks at those gender profiles and age. So what we found is that first of all, we looked at the population overall of children and young people in Shropshire and what we're looking at in terms of population size. And we're going to see a fall by 8% in the next 25 years. That's falling slightly quicker than we see nationally, which will fall by 5%. So with that in mind, it's thinking about what that means for our SEND population of children. Currently, over the latest year of 24-25, we have 8,653 school-age children that have special educational needs in Shropshire, and almost 20% of those, that makes up almost 20% of our school-age children in the county, so 1 in 5, similar to what we see nationally and regionally. And with more males than females, and that's been formed into a recommendation, which we'll see later. And almost half of our SEND children are 11 to 15-year-olds, so slightly older age groups. That implies potentially some missing of that early intervention piece. We also have seen, obviously, the increase that we all know about since COVID pandemic, and particularly amongst those children with EHCPs, we've seen a rise of 78%, and that's that chart at the bottom there with that orange line that you can see trajectory going upwards. We also investigated that rurality element of Shropshire. So do we have large numbers of children living in Shropshire in rural areas that have EHCPs, and are those needs being met because they live so rurally and can't access support? And in dark green on that map on the right, you can see where they live. So I thought that's quite an interesting one to put in, mostly around the borders of the county. So that obviously has implications for how we work with our bordering counties and support them. Next slide, please. Education, as you can imagine, this was a massive chapter. It's huge, and the last JSNA was almost certainly only focused on this aspect. We've brought in all those other sort of wider determinants of a child's well-being. And just before I go on to talk about the primary need and what our most prevalent one is, there was a lot of discussion amongst partners about how we record this and how it's recorded differently in different schools and the validity of that data. So that did form a recommendation. But nonetheless, with the data we have, we saw that SEMH, which is social, emotional, mental health needs, are the most prevalent amongst all our SEND children, all ages, in all schools. And then speech, language and communication needs was the second most prevalent. So there was a lot of discussion in the system around whether that is it a presenting need, or has it got a supporting diagnostic? Is it actually more behavioural classification? So there's a lot of work needs to be done there in the system around that. If you look at the chart on the right, that is just to demonstrate the change since COVID-19 pandemic and how that impacted it. So we've seen a substantial rise in autistic spectrum disorder, so doubling since 2019-20, and then also a threefold rise in SEND support with no specialist type of assessment of needs. So that's where we're providing support, but we haven't really identified exactly what that need is, and that might be because there's multiple and it's not an obvious prevalent one. There are profiles of different school stages and all the different cuts of data in this chapter, so it's very detailed. So if you're interested, go read that one. Next slide, please. Education continued. There's so much on this, I'm aware, but don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of it. We've been sitting in for 2 hours. But just to say that educational attainment was quite a big feature in this chapter, and we know that educational attainment isn't as we're not achieving expected levels of attainment as well as non-SEN children or children without SEN, and especially that worsens as they go through school years. As the level of need sort of increases for children with SEN, so the severity of their need, their rate of absences gets higher. So in primary school, we know that absence rates are 3 times higher among those children with EHCPs compared to those without SEN. And then in secondary school, the rates get even higher at 52% with the HCPs versus 34% those without SEN. So there's definitely disparity and inequality there. SCMH is what's sort of driving those absences. We also did some deep diving in the chapter around within each need, what has the highest prevalence rates. The good news story, which we're pleased to hear, is that majority of our 16 to 17-year-olds with SEN are in education and training as of 2025 at above 90% and above the national and regional rates. But those young people that aren't in education and training, the rates are higher among SEN. So the chart on the right there sort of profiles that. So 16 to 17-year-olds for all the children in Shropshire, young people that aren't in education, employment or training, we're at 3%. But with no SEN, it's similar. And then for those of the HCs and SEN support, you can see it's slightly higher, but we're nowhere near that national and regional rate. So we're doing quite well there. And you can see that bottom chart there shows that decline in the numbers and proportions that aren't in education and training. So good news story there. Just want to highlight really quickly as well that the number of children home educated is rising that have special educational needs. And that one is something that also was formed in the recommendations. Next slide. Social care. So again, this was a new sort of lens to look at amongst SEN children. We didn't have a huge amount of data to go on here. So again, there's lots of work to be done in the system around how to improve that. But in summary, we essentially had a notable rise in children that we class as vulnerable. So children looked after, or children with protection plans rising in the latest year. And that's mainly driven by EHCPs, which obviously is where we see a high level of need. If you look at that chart on the top right there, that's our profile of each of those sort of vulnerable groups. And you can see for Shropshire, we've got a much higher rate of children in need with SEN compared to regionally and nationally at 73%. So 62% of those have the HCPs. For children looked after and children with child protection plans, our rates are quite similar, but still quite a stark finding of, half of our children in those vulnerable groups, and those two groups have special educational needs. And the children need with the EHCPs is really rising as well in the latest years. The other bit I just wanted to point out on that slide is the number of care leavers with SEN has also doubled since 2020. So 1 in 5 of our care leavers now, and we know have special educational needs when they leave care. Next slide, please. And the last sort of high-level finding chapter summary is health. So this was quite a challenging one to get data on, not for a lack of effort with partnership working with the ICB and NHS with brilliant engagement, but more because of the recording of SEND in health systems and databases. So what we did was we looked at GP patient registers for learning disabilities and filtered out just our children and young people up to age 25. And we found that there were more males than females on that register. Counting for 2/3 at 64% were male, 66% were age 15 plus. So, and if you look at that sort of pyramid, that shows you the majority of them are in that older age group. So potentially we're not recording with GPs, the younger age groups, potentially because it's not diagnostic there. and that we also have that deprivation gradient going through, so there is an inequality where if you lived in a more deprived area, you're more likely to have potentially SEND on and have that on the register itself. Most common comorbidities were epilepsy and asthma, but also we found that obesity was coming through as well, but the data quality was not there for us to really do a deep dive. But we did find that 32% were overweight or obese, but quite a large proportion were unknown, with 23% underweight. So a bit of a mixed profile, but from the research, we do know that obesity is also a risk factor. The other bit is around tooth extractions and so tooth decay, and we know that that is particularly a challenge for SEND children with learning disabilities, and we see that reflected in admission rates to hospital for tooth extractions. And the last slide from me is the recommendations. So in the report itself, we've got all those 5 recommendations, and within them, more specific actions that directly relate to those key findings. So hopefully we'll get those endorsed today. I won't go through all the actions within them, but the high level ones are early identification, prevention and inclusion, which ties into community and family hubs and also our neighbourhood health working. So getting that help earlier and reducing escalation. Child-centred practice, so ensuring we've got that voice of the child and parent care, which we do have in a chapter called stakeholder engagement in the JSNA, but again, something we can improve on. Integrated pathways and targeted provision, so joining up education, health and care. When we're doing the data, it was really obvious that that wasn't really happening, and then throughout partners talking also could be better. System data quality and assurance, improving our accuracy, accountability and evidence. We're currently, from all this work, we've worked out exactly where data is. Now we know where it is, we can get it into a dashboard, and we're building a partnership dashboard for SEND, which will make all this much easier in the future to see our impact. And the 5th one is preparation for adulthood and life outcomes. So beyond that 16, 17-year-olds, where are SEND children going? What's their quality of life and what do their wellbeing look like?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jess, for that whistle-stop tour through an enormous topic. And so if there are 1 or 2 questions, then we can take them, but we are running short of time. So we won't.
Chair, just to say thank you to Jess. I think she's mentioned already that this used to be a education only JSNA, and it's wonderful to have health and social care information because it now allows us to get into the levels of conversation and curiosity we want to get into. So I want to put that on record, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just to echo that, really, I was going to say exactly the same thing. You know, we work really well with contributions and being much more rounded vision of life for these children. Thank you.
Thank you, and that goes from me as well. So you've got 3 yeses. So, ladies and gents, we're asked to accept the recommendations of the SEND JSNA for early identification, prevention and inclusion, getting help earlier, reducing escalation and improving equity of service, for child-centred practice, ensuring children and young people are understood, heard and supported appropriately, for integrated pathways and targeted provision, joined up services across education, health and care, for system quality data and assurance, improve accuracy, accountability and evidence, and in terms of preparation for adulthood and life outcomes, sustained impact beyond compulsory education. Have I got someone to move that? Thank you, David. And there, second, thank you. Those in favour, please. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you very much, Jess. So the next item is for discussion by exception. And this is the BCF Q3 template. I don't think there was anything significant about that, was there? Sorry?
Jess and Deborah.
Yes. So, Jess and Deborah, have you any comments on this?
Good morning. Thank you to the board. It was just really to highlight that this is a retrospective approval. Health and Wellbeing Board doesn't always line up time-wise, unfortunately, with the times that we have to return this to NHS England. So, did you want me to just briefly run through it, or do we take it as read?
I think we should all have read through the papers, and we're aware that the report is as expected, unless there were some items you particularly wanted to highlight.
It is as expected. I mean, essentially, Shropshire's on track to meet all the national BCF headline metrics on emergency admissions, delayed discharges, and the long-term residential admissions. The only thing potentially just to flag is in looking ahead is that the future integration of BCF planning will be with the neighbourhood health planning, which does give us opportunities to strengthen system collaboration and improve delivery of shared strategic priorities. But that's for 27-28, and we're currently waiting for NHSE to work up the mechanics of that, so we don't have the details yet. But it was just to flag that that's a change for the future, and as we're moving into 26-27, essentially it's expected that current planning will roll over into the new financial year with some reporting required. We've got a full plan to report by the end of April, which of course we will bring to Health and Wellbeing Board in the future.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Am I right in assuming that or in reading that the value of the BCF settlement for 26-27 is the same as it was for 25-26?
That is correct. Yeah, there's no material change expected.
And so this may well present a pressure related to inflationary increase.
Generally, that's been the case year on year with BCF. Unfortunately, they don't always build in inflationary pressures, but to date, we've managed to, essentially absorb a lot of that within changes to projects. But that's something that we're looking at for the new year as we roll forward the new plan into 26-27.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And so, Board, we're asked to approve the BCF, the Better Care Fund 2025-26 Q3 template. Do I have a proposer, please? Nigel and seconder. And so those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you. So we move now on to cardiovascular, renal and metabolic update. And Claire Parker, you're going to kindly take us through that.
I am. In the interest of time, I will just keep it very short because there's a lot of detail in this. I just want to say thank you to Naz Khan, who's our clinical lead, who's actually coordinated the production of the strategy. A couple of things just to say around it. What we've been moving to is this multi-morbidity strategy. So aligning the CVD, cardiovascular disease prevention strategy, diabetes strategy into one multi-morbidity strategy. So actually we know that there's lots of codependencies on things like hypertension, heart failure, diabetes and renal disease. So that's a really, really positive step. We're coming towards the end of year one of this strategy, and what I would suggest, Chair, is perhaps in a couple of either the next or the Health and Wellbeing Board after that we actually bring a report back on the end of year one of the strategy and where we've seen, because we are seeing that shift in dial, but it's coming very close to the end of the year, so it'd be better to leave it a few months and then just report on some of the positive steps and some of the implementation work and the mobilisation work that's happening through the strategy. So I'll leave it at that for now, and then if there's any specific questions, but then perhaps we could have a more detailed discussion in a future board.
Thank you very much, Claire, and I fully support that. Can I just ask a little bit about the dashboards to monitor the KPIs? Have you got any detail about that?
Yeah, they're in development at the moment. We've got quite good workup of the cardiovascular renal, and we're linking it to things like prevention, so smoking prevention, so where smoking has an impact on kidney disease, hypertension, etc. And we're starting to be able to look forward at, if we do X, the impact will be Y, and what that impacts actually in reality on individual outcomes for people, on impacts on things like beds and length of stay in the hospital. And actually what we're starting to see now is that shift in the dial. So we'll be able to see improvement in outcomes in things like, we know we're an outlier for amputation rates and diabetes. So what we're hoping is that that dashboard development, certainly happy to share it, we'll give it a couple more weeks because it's just being refined at the moment with feedback from partners. But yes, we're starting to get that development of dashboard. But if you'd like to have an early look at it, Chair, we will certainly share that because I know you'd
That'd be lovely. That. Thank you, Claire. Nigel Lee.
Only just to add, I think, just following that, then obviously the outcomes, and again, I know that we've got experts around us, but there's going to be obviously some really important health outcomes, in terms of quality. But I think in line with, and again, I know we've talked about the National Neighbourhood Framework, but the work that already we've been doing about in Shropshire with the National Neighbourhood Programme, in that nationally there has been some key measures there, and it's I think primarily around making sure that we look at moving what is currently in the urgent and emergency unplanned into a more planned set of interventions. That's how I see it. And I think therefore, we've had a previously endorsed frailty strategy. This is CVRM. This is about making sure that we collectively care and manage and support those patients with multiple long-term conditions. And again, from a hospital perspective, we do our very best to do individual conditions, don't we, and have expertise. Most other parts of our health and care system will deal with the residents with multiple challenges. And so I think this is a really good example of moving to really drive a multi-morbid approach, as Claire said. But as I say, whilst health outcomes are absolutely vital, I think we also need to make sure that we track and therefore what the impact is on reducing urgent, for example, GP demand or demand at the emergency department.
So, thank you, Nigel. And of course, unplanned care is more expensive and more difficult to provide than if it's planned.
And disruptive for residents.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, I think the one of the main reasons for having all of these conditions together is the overlapping issues like obesity that really are common features in lots of these diseases, and actually by addressing one at a time means we would be doing repetitive work and also maybe allowing some things to fall down the cracks in the middle. So it's really important that this is seen as a public health initiative as well as a health one. One of the questions I just had, Claire, was that I think the recommendations ask us to endorse the delivery plan. I can't see a delivery plan in the slides. I can see the milestones with some recommendations, but very health focused. And I wondered whether there was a separate delivery plan that we were expecting, or whether just for clarity, so that we know what we're definitely agreeing to today.
Apologies, I don't know, because obviously I'm presenting this on NAS's behalf, but I would have assumed it was endorsing the strategy as opposed to the delivery plan.
Yeah,
so
the recommendations do say delivery plan. Yeah, so I think if there's a delivery plan, we'll see that later.
Yes, that's right. Okay. Thanks very much for that, Vanessa. And so, board, we're asked to endorse the cardiovascular, renal, and metabolic strategy for system. Actually, it's not for system-wide implementation yet. To approve the governance arrangements and year one milestones. To support development of neighbourhood level action plans, and B, dashboards to monitor KPIs. So do we have a mover for that, please? Yeah, Nigel. Vanessa, second. And those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Claire. And we look forward to receiving the end of year report. So we move on to SHIP update by Rachel Robinson.
Chair, so usually this report's just for noting, but I noted Jackie's question earlier, and so I just want to make sure I respond to that. Just the last SHIP was actually a focused SHIP meeting that we had. It was following the Health and Wellbeing Board session, the joint session, which was Health and Wellbeing Board and SHIP, where we came together and agreed the priorities for the next year, the Health and Wellbeing Board, but also started to put down the framework of what the next health and wellbeing strategy should look like, and therefore where we will be focusing SHIP next year. But also we had a focus session then after that on the Children and Young People's Mental Health Services new contract, and so that's what the report references. So that's in the pack for information, but I just wanted, in terms of the prevention funding, that is currently, there was an email that came out yesterday to SHIP members, which I will make sure, Jack, that you have a copy of, because you may not have received that. So it one came out yesterday, but it does say that we're in mobilisation now of the prevention funding that's been led by a community resource on behalf of the BCC to get that funding out to partners. So that's mobilising at the moment. I'm just reading the email, but I will forward it to you and to other colleagues. Where the initiation period has started. We're working with partners to finalise the delivery arrangements, including partner roles, geographies, venues and referral pathways. That is improved. That has started. So with the plan that full mobilisation will be done by the end of April. I'll forward you that email.
So those people put in funding applications will be told by community resource.
Community resource are managing on behalf of the public sector all of those proposals. So they should be they're contacting, they are leading that proposal. That's how we managed it through SHIP.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thanks, Jackie. So that's for just noting. Are there any pharmacy updates? Thank you, Louisa. And then final item 14, information on health overview and scrutiny committee. And I think it's just to note the most recent papers for the meeting that was held on the 26th of January 2026. Rachel, was there anything that we needed to add to that? I don't think so. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think there was one small item of any other business. Is that correct?
Very small, yes. It's quite big actually, but not in conversation. I just wanted members of the Health and Wellbeing Board just to point in the direction that yesterday the Neighbourhood Health Framework was launched. There is a link. I'll ask Louise to circulate it to board members if you haven't seen it already. It's going to be really important for us, and particularly for us as a Health and Wellbeing Board, because Health and Wellbeing Boards will have a stronger approach towards kind of neighbourhood health, and it articulates what the first year and the second year will need to look like. There are metrics within it as well. If it's helpful, I have done a 4-page summary of the document, which is a bit easier to digest and send out to your sort of people, and it just kind of gives the key headlines. I have read it in detail twice now, so feel free to ask me any questions, but I just wanted to raise that, and I'll get the summary circulated as well to board members.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much, Claire. Was there a brief question about that, or I think most of us are just looking forward to reading it and digesting it over the next few days? And so I'll call this meeting to an end. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance and contributions. Can't remember the date of the next meeting. Correct. So the next meeting is on May the 21st. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Safe journey home.